So next up, I'd like to introduce a creative moment. Here I have with me Albertina Padilla. And so Albertina is a storyteller and the co-founder and story curator at mihistoria.net and facilitator of storytelling workshops. So Albertina was born to a farm worker family in Monterey, California, was a classroom teacher for over 20 years and has served in a variety of community roles. Shop steward and union representative, soccer coach, mentor for the National Latina Health Organization, board member of Clinica de la Raza, and a member of the Teacher Advisory Board of the Oakland Museum of California and Luna Dance Institute. So Albertina works with individuals and groups, helping them find the key to unlock their stories and thus their passage to shaping the world around them. And so she's gonna share a story and then we'll have some tips. So I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. How is everyone this morning? We have an interpreter also. That is amazing. I love that. Saludos a todos los que hablan español, a todos los hispanoparlantes también. So I am here to share a story with you about reinvention and also some ideas around what to do and how to move your stories forward, because everyone has a story to share and everyone's stories is important. Everybody has that gift. Storytelling is the oldest art form and it's accessible to everyone. We just oftentimes don't hear everyone's story. It's not a part of the mainstream, and what I work on is to bring forward the stories of people who you may not have heard from in the mainstream before. Farm worker women, for instance. We've worked with líderes campesinas to share the stories of farm worker women, brought a cadre of farm worker women to San Francisco, and they shared stories that they were interested in letting people know about. 4 pillars that they work around: pesticides, labor conditions, immigration, domestic violence. So not your typical stories that you may hear in the media, but stories that have a place. So the story of reinvention that I'd like to share is the story of what happened to me when I left teaching. When I left teaching, I actually was pushed out of my classroom. It was at a point in time where budgets were real important and there wasn't a whole lot of money, and so I was the highest paid teacher in my classroom. And so from one day to the next, I was out of my classroom. I knew myself enough to know that there were certain things I needed in my life. I needed to exercise. So I began to exercise a lot more. I began to walk. I knew that I needed to be in an organization that was large, so that the focus wasn't just on me, but that the focus went outward, that I needed to be of service to others. And so I began to look around my community to see where there was a need for me to volunteer, again, to take that focus off of me. And so I began to volunteer and exercise, and I met a filmmaker who asked me to join her on her project. And so I had the opportunity to work on a film, and from the film, we developed the Mi Historia website, which I invite you all to come and see. Put it on your computer, on your telephone. It's both in English and in Spanish, and I invite you to read the stories, to look at the photographs that we share, and to upload your own if you are so inclined. Now, when I left my classroom, the following day I went and got a pedicure. My toenails are super ugly, and so I needed to take care of myself. So I was on the phone with a colleague, and she called me and said, "Is it true that you've left?" And yes. what are you going to do? It's like, well, land on my 2 feet, of course. I remembered a story that my father had told me. He came to this country as a bracero in the 1940s, and his story was of being put on a bus to be taken to Arizona and to uproot himself from the Salinas Valley and go to a state he had no interest in being in. And he said, Mika, my daughter, I don't want to go to Arizona. I didn't sign up to go to Arizona. He says he tried to tell everyone on the bus to get off, and no one got off. He got off with just a blanket and went and slept under an overpass and began all over again by knocking on doors. So when I left, that was the story that I heard in my head. And I'm thinking to myself, well, here I am, born in this country. I have a roof over my head. I have a family that supports me. I can do this. I will land on my 2 feet. Of course I will. There's nothing I can't do. If my father could do this with a blanket, and I have an education, a family, and a roof over my head and food on my table, there's nothing I can't do. So 1 foot in front of the other and starting anew. I think it's real important for us to develop a sense of optimism and to have a sense of humor, that resilient people face difficult situations realistically, yet find ways to be optimistic. I found a way to be optimistic when I left my identity as a teacher by exercising, by giving of myself to others, and by doing some creative endeavors in the filmmaking world, which I had never done before. And through the website, I was a neophyte, a Luddite more than anything. I didn't know the first thing about developing a website, but it was done. And in terrible times, it's real important to find meaning and purpose. No matter what's going on, you can choose your attitude and show leadership by setting an example for others. In the course of that reinvention process, I heard from all kinds of friends who said, "Whoa, you did this? How did you do this?" And it's the attitude that we take. It's experiencing something new, encountering someone, and helping others in the process. Another tip I would suggest is to reframe your perspective. Focus on what is truly in your power to control. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, and finding opportunity takes imagination and the ability to reframe your perspectives. So develop a sense of optimism, find meaning and purpose, and reframe your perspective. And then express yourself creatively. All of us can rediscover a lost skill. I look back on the people that I grew up with. I see a friend of my father who was a chip carver. I see seamstresses. My mother would come home from 16-hour days and work on creating clothing for others. I see people being resourceful with what they had around them. So express yourself creatively. La cultura cura. Our culture cures us. Creative expression has the power to heal emotions and to nurture our soul. When you create, you shift your field of attention. It becomes something that is life-affirming and that generates even more of a process forward. And then improvise, be bold. Resilient people are masters of resourcefulness and innovation. It gives you the capacity to improvise and create and problem solve using the materials that you have available around you. And again, what I used was what I had available. Sometimes it takes a little bit of output to begin to create things, and if you don't have the resources to do that with, then you use what you have. You fall back on the most basic. I fell back on storytelling, and that is what I have always loved. When my mother worked 16-hour days as a housekeeper, there was a house on the estate that she cleaned and that my father was the handyman at. And that house had a library in the child's bedroom of the family that lived there. He was away for most of the time at boarding school, and so his library was open. And when I was a child, I have to confess that I did something that was a sort of irreverent. I did not know English at that point, so I figured that the best thing I needed to do was to read and to check out his library. And so when no one was around, I stole into his room and I would take books and I would read them. I would take them and sit under a tree and I would read those books. And from those books, I learned so much, not just about language, not just about English, but about the world, about places I had not visited and still haven't. But I think that because of what I did in taking those books, I learned about stories also, and I learned that stories are important, and I think that is a part of the reason why I became a storyteller, because if we go back far enough, we'll find that thread that comes through our lives, and we just need to pick up on it and move forward.
Oh my goodness. Are you all as stunned as I am? Thank you, Albertina. That was so good. And can we just take a minute for you to tell us those, embedded in those lovely stories were very concrete tips for creativity and resiliency that were just amazing. I was furiously taking notes. Could you say them quickly for us again?
Sure.
Yeah.
To develop a sense of optimism and humor, to find meaning and purpose. There's a quote from my college, remember who you are and what that represents. Always sticks in my mind. You know who you are. You have a little, my father would always used to tell me that when I was down, Mija, there's a string inside of you. Pull it from the top of your head and straighten it. And it is your essence, who you are. When that essence is straight, you know who you are. You know what you are worth. You know what your value is. Find it, remember it, pull it, make it strong.
Oh my goodness, so good. And I think we'll put some of those tips up on the Creative Aging Symposium website as well. So thank you so much for your time today, Albertina. We'll move on to our next speaker. Sure appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.